Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another film review, and today we're going to be talking about Shin Ultraman. Really quick, I just want to give a quick spoiler warning. There will be minor spoilers in this video, so if you've not seen Shin Ultraman, then I suggest clicking off this video and, watching the movie and then coming back. If you have seen the movie, then please stick around and stay. If you haven't seen the movie and don't really care about spoilers, then I don't know, I guess stick around. At the end of the day, I don't really care what you do. I'm just saying there will be spoilers in this video, so if you have not seen the movie, then there's your spoiler warning. And another thing I just want to quickly say, I've actually had this movie on Blu-ray for about a month now, and I'm just now getting to it. I don't know why, I've just been kind of holding it off. And also, well, one reason in particular, but we'll talk about that later, much later in this video, but still. And just one more thing I just want to say, this is going to be like a podcast type video. I'll put up pictures on screen of what I'm talking about, but this isn't really scripted or anything like that. So there are going to be points where I pause and I kind of stutter. And it's again, this isn't scripted or anything like that. This is more so just I'm looking off notes, sort of just notes. I'm just kind of going off of that. So again, this is not scripted or anything like that. So again, that's another thing I wanted to give a little bit of a warning of. But yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much it with all of that. Now to get in the review. And well, actually, before I talk about the movie, I just wanted to quickly talk about my history with the tokusatsu genre. So when I was a kid, well, obviously, if you've been subscribed to my channel for a while now, you will know that I am obsessed with Godzilla. I've always loved Godzilla when I was a kid. Middle school, high school, even college, which more recent. I have always been obsessed with Godzilla, and Godzilla has just played a huge role in my life growing up. But the thing is, for most of my life up until now, I was exclusively a Godzilla kid. I didn't really care about any other giant monster related things. So I didn't care too much for Pacific Rim. I didn't watch it. And just a lot of other, even Cloverfield. Actually, to be fair, I still need to watch Cloverfield, but that's besides the point. Growing up, I was exclusively a Godzilla kid. It wasn't until my sophomore year at college, which was actually a couple years ago. I was talking with a really good friend of mine who's really into tokusatsu as well, but more obviously he was more into the other stuff besides Godzilla. And he was talking about Gamera for a little bit. And one of the things I said was, I'm sure I'd like Gamera, but I don't know, I think I'm just content with just watching Godzilla. He looked at me like I had three heads, and he told me, dude, the 90s Gamera trilogy is better than a majority of Godzilla movies. And growing up, Gamera was always the cheesy Godzilla, so Gamera kind of had that reputation, which is what I heard. So I was interested, really, Gamera's better than Godzilla? And he's talking about it a little bit. And then as we hung out, we kept talking more and more about Gamera, which really made me want to check it out. So sure enough, back in March of 2021, I checked out the 90s Gamera trilogy, and sure enough, yeah, they were great. The first movie, Guardian of the Universe, it was a good movie, but it wasn't as strong as I thought it would be. But then we get to Gamera 2, and that's when it really picks up. And of course, Gamera 3 is one of the greatest kaiju movies of all time. And watching those movies for the first time, made it definitely encouraged me to check out other non-Godzilla kaiju films. In fact, October of that same year, not only did I go back and check out the Showa Gamera movies, but I also checked out other kaiju related movies like the original Rodan, the original Mothra, War of the Gargantuas, the Daimajin trilogy, and of course the topic of today's video, Ultraman. I didn't check out Ultraman until this past November actually, and I watched the original series and I thought it was good. The ending I wasn't a big fan of, and I thought it went on for a little too long. But still, I did really like the original series. I thought it was good. And my friend, before watching the original Ultraman series, he said to me, "You would like Ultraman Tiga, because that's also very good." So sure enough, the next month, that December, I checked out Ultraman Tiga, and yeah, he was right. I really liked Ultraman Tiga. And that kind of leads us to the topic of today's video, Shin Ultraman. This movie got a theatrical release on January 11th, so of course I went to that. And I wanted to wait until I had the Blu-ray of the movie to actually talk about it. And I have it now, but well, again, I'll talk more about the Blu-ray situation later in this video, but yeah. And even before watching the movie again, I checked out Ultra Q, which I thought was interesting. It was interesting. Not bad. I liked it, but it was interesting. But yeah, so I have the Blu-ray. I watched Shin Ultraman yesterday, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind. So yeah, at the end of the day, what did I think about Shin Ultraman? Well, let's talk about the movie. Starting with the characters. The first character I want to talk about is Shinji Kaminaga, who was Ultraman. And I liked him. I think he was my favorite character in the movie. I think he played Ultraman very well. One of the things I like about Ultraman, as a character, he's an alien, but he's not like a stereotypical alien who's trying to take over the world or anything like that. Ultraman, he loves humans, and he wants to see them have a bright future, and that's why he protects them from various different monsters and aliens and whatnot. And it's that's something I do really like about Ultraman. And when he's in his human state, he's learning about how human societies work and how social norms and whatnot, and how humans function basically. And I thought that was really good. It could have been a little stronger with his character. I wish there were more scenes involving him kind of observing humans and just kind of seeing how they function. I wish there's a little more of that, but still, I did really like Kaminaga. I thought he was a great character, and I think he was a really good Ultraman. The next character I want to talk about is Hiroko. Yeah, Hiroko Wasami. I'm reading off of notes, and I'm pretty bad with names, so I'm so sorry if I mess anything up. But yeah, Hiroko Wasami. She was the senior investigator of the movie, and I liked her too. She was the love interest for Kaminaga in the movie, a little bit, but also, yeah. I didn't really have a whole lot to say about her. She was okay. She had some fun moments, but yeah, for the most part, it's just kind of I don't know. Don't really have a whole lot to say about her. The next character I want to talk about, Yumi Funaberi. She was the biologist, so of course she kind of determined and figure out how kaiju functioned and how they worked. And again, not a whole lot to say. She wasn't a bad character by any means, but there wasn't really a whole lot to her. She had some standout moments, but for the most part, she wasn't a character that I was particularly I didn't like her very much. Not in a bad way. She was fine, but she could have been a little better, I think. The last character I want to talk about. This movie has a few different characters, but we really follow just mainly four characters in this movie. And the last character I want to talk about is Akiyasa Taki. Again, I'm bad with names. I'm sorry if I messed that up. But he was the non-particle physicist in the movie, and again, he was okay. Again, he was kind of there to figure out how kaiju were able to do the things they do. He kind of figures out how Naranga gets his electric powers and how he turns invisible and whatnot. And again, I think he was okay. Nothing too noteworthy about him. He was just he was an alright character, I guess. And I think that's pretty much it as far as the characters I want to talk about. I think I think besides the main character and maybe Hiroko Wasami, I think some of the characters in this movie, like, there's not really a whole lot, going for them, I don't think. But I think that's kind of the point, because I think, like, the point is just, like, kind of like the point of view of, like, Ultraman, Kaminaga. He's, like, learning how humans function, and he sees, this biologist, he sees this, this physicist and this, like, secretary lady, this, investigator lady, and he's just kind of seeing like how humans function, and I think like that's kind of the point for like the other characters being kind of one dimensional. I feel so. Yeah, the characters in this movie, not as strong as they could have been, but I feel like that's kind of the point. So yeah, the characters in this movie, I did like, I didn't dislike them, but like they could have been a little stronger. But again, that's kind of the point of them, like not being as strong as they could have been. The soundtrack for this movie I thought was very good. I think all of the remix tracks from the original Ultraman were very good. M87 is such a good song. I love that song so much. And even early morning Tokyo from Shin Godzilla, that's played here, and that was a really nice touch. One of the things I really like about this movie is the connections it has with Shin Godzilla, but we'll talk about that later. The writing I thought was pretty solid. For the most part, there were some things, some lines of dialogue that kind of took me out of the movie, and just like some moments that I wasn't a big fan of. But for the most part, I think, yeah, I think the story, the writing, I think it was solid. I think it was pretty solid writing. The cinematography is great. A lot of shots in this movie give off Shin Godzilla vibes. It has like this like great sense of like scale, of like this perspectives of like where like the monsters or aliens are, and it's like really cool. Again, it gives off like really serious Shin Godzilla vibes. I mean, obviously it's the same director, so of course they're gonna feel similar, as far as like the cinematography goes. But still, like, cinematography here is great, and I absolutely loved it. One of my favorite examples of this was actually with Zetten. There's a part like you see him like in the sky, like in space, like from Earth, and like those shots of him look really nice, like really really cool. I love those shots so much. So yeah, the cinematography in this movie very good indeed. The special effects in this movie I think were also very good. About on par with Shin Godzilla. At points, Ultraman I think looks a little uncanny, but I think that's kind of the point. Because, he's an alien, so of course he's going to seem more like otherworldly. So, yeah, the special effects, I think, again, are also very solid. So, yeah. Another thing I want to talk about would be the sound design. And just like with Shin Godzilla, I thought the sound design in this movie was great. A lot of the sounds were ripped from a lot of, like, Showa era, like, tokusatsu movies. So, like, the sounds of, like, all the monsters were, like, very, Showa-esque. And even like the sounds of like all of the buildings getting destroyed and all of like the tanks and whatnot, like and all the explosions, like it sounds like something from the Showa era of like tokusatsu, and I think like it was done very tastefully. I think it sounded great. And even Ultraman, like in the original series, Ultraman, like he made like a bunch of different sounds when he was like fighting the monsters and aliens and whatnot. But like here, he is completely silent. And again, like, well, obviously, that was done intentionally, but that was done to like sort of make Ultraman seem more like alien and like otherworldly. And again, I think that really worked. And overall, I do think that the sound design in this movie is just really good. Very very top notch stuff here. Um, I do have some overall negatives with the movie that I just want to quickly talk about. One thing that I didn't like about the movie, the pacing, I thought was a little off at points. The pacing was very like stop and go. Like something would like pop up, Ultraman would stop it, and then it just kind of stop and move on to something else, and then just this just the whole cycle, just like something pops up, Ultraman stops it, new thing. Something pops up, Ultraman stops it, new thing, and it's just kind of very stop and go, and it's very like I think what they're trying to do, they're trying to replicate like the original show by having each monster like feel like just like a separate episode of a show, which is cool, but it also leads to some pacing issues, and I kind of got that here. It gave me a little bit of whiplash, and I feel like some of these scenes I feel like could have been bridged together a little better. Maybe like instead of fighting Gabora after Ultraman fights Naranga, maybe he can fight like Alien Bolton instead, and maybe that can like better like introduce the idea of aliens. I think that would have worked pretty well, but still, some of the pacing in this movie I thought was a little, not so. I feel like it could have been touched up a little more. Another thing I didn't like about this movie is that there were some moments here that kind of took me out of the movie. Hiroko Wasami has this thing with her character where she'll just, grab her butt, which was kind of weird. I don't really know why that was there. That was just something she did. At one point in the movie, one of the characters says the word shit, but like they censor it, with like a very loud like bleep sound, and yeah, it's just kind of like it just kind of took me out of the movie, just like that moment where she just like screamed, and yeah, I wasn't really a big fan of that. I mean, like in that scene, all their technology got fried, and obviously, like everyone was upset by that. So I get like why she kind of swore like that, but still like, and I'm not saying like like swear. I'm not like this Christian like, oh you can't swear that's bad. Like no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like they censored it, and it was just very like jarring and like out of nowhere. And yeah, that was one thing I didn't like. And there's another scene in this movie that I wasn't a big fan of too, where so when Mephiles shows up, he turns Hiroko Wasami like giant to sort of like show off the power of the Beta Box, which is like similar to what Ultraman uses to become Ultraman. And it makes like people big, and Ultraman wants to put a stop to this because he feels like this is going to cause conflict with other planets. So Ultraman is trying to locate the Beta Box so he can stop Mephiles, and for him to do so, he needs to track it through Asami because she turned into a giant through this, which was a pretty fun homage to the original episode of the show. But what Ultraman does, he like in he's in like his human state at this point. He starts sniffing her, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. I feel like there could have been like something else to like track her or track the Beta Box in, but like he just starts sniffing her in this like kind of dragged out scene, and it just kind of, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of weird, and it kind of took me out of the movie. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. But besides the pacing and like those weird moments in the movie, that's pretty much it for my overall negatives here. Now I want to talk about some of my overall positives with the movie. One thing that I really appreciated with this movie was were all the references to Shin Godzilla. Now, like I mentioned earlier, obviously the guy who directed this movie, Hideaki Anno, he directed Shin Godzilla. Obviously this is called Shin Ultraman. So there are some references to Shin Godzilla in this movie that I think are pretty cool. For context, the original intro to Ultraman kind of starts out as like the intro for Ultra Q. Like think like the letters kind of like slowly like kind of whirl into like the actual title of the show, which was Ultra Q, and then it exploded and then got replaced with Ultraman. And they did that here, like they had it like the intro play out like the original Ultra Q series, but instead of saying Ultra Q, it said Shin Godzilla, and then it exploded, and it said Shin Ultraman, and I thought that was a really cool reference to not only Shin Godzilla, but a really cool reference to Ultra Q as well. And even like one of the monsters, Gomez. So again, for context, in the original series, Eiji Tsuburaya had huge involvement with the series Ultra Q. I don't know if he directed the show or not. I know he did the special effects, but I'm not sure if he directed it. But anyway, he directed what am I saying? Yeah. So basically, he had access to all of the Toho suits, from all the various different Godzilla movies and like, other tokusatsu, films that Toho did at the time. So what they did was that they took a Godzilla suit and modified it into its own original monster, calling it Gomez. And they did that here with Shin Ultraman. Gomez is in this movie, and basically all it is just a modified like Shin Godzilla model. And I thought that was really cool. Like another really really cool reference to not only the original series, but again like Shin Godzilla as well. So all the references to Shin Godzilla in this movie, I think, are just really cool. The movie also shares like a lot of like connections with Shin Godzilla. It's not a sequel to Shin Godzilla, like it's its own thing. But as far as like the tone of each movie are like the polar opposites of each other, and like that's kind of how they can like they kind of. Well, let me explain. Shin Godzilla's tone was very like a lot of like death and despair with Shin Godzilla's tone involving the Japanese government and how they handle Godzilla. You know, and here in Shin Ultraman, what happened is like the tone is like the polar opposite, where it's like hope. Ultraman, he loves humans, he cares about humans and wants to see them live on, and not only does he fight, he fights off aliens, but Ultraman represents hope, so that way like humans like they can build a better future, because like right now humans are kind of destroying themselves, but with hope and like actually like fighting for like a better future, we can hopefully get out of that state, in the context of the movie. And again, that's why Ultraman kind of stops like other aliens and monsters from taking over. I think the other like aliens and monsters in Ultraman are sort of a metaphor for various different things that this our society faces, whether it be climate change or other countries doing stuff that's not good, and just like stuff like that. And I think like Ultraman is supposed to represent hope, and that like like we can like stop this kind of. So yeah, like Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman like really like bookend each other very well by being the polar opposites, and I think that's really cool that they connect with each other in that way. Another thing I really liked about this movie were all of the reimaginings of all the different classic Ultraman monsters and aliens. I talked about Gomez earlier and how he was a modified Shin Godzilla model, which again I still think is really cool. Another example of this that I really like was Zetten. In the original series, he was like he looked a lot like a beetle, even though they called him a dinosaur for some reason. He looked like a beetle, and yeah, and he was like a weapon to like destroy the Earth, and that's what he is here. He's like a weapon, but this time he's like a proper he's not like a beetle like type of like cyborg thing, or he's not like a guy in a suit. This is like a proper like alien piece of like alien technology that resembles the shape of Zen, and it's massive too. And Zen was just done really well. I loved Zen in this movie, and like I mentioned earlier, all the shots of like him for like the point of view from Earth, seeing him like in the sky was just so cool. So yeah, I absolutely loved Zen in this movie. I thought it was really cool as well. One more overall positive I have with this movie is that it actually fixes like one of the bigger issues I had with the original series. Basically, in the original series, like how it ended, Ultraman unfortunately dies while fighting Zetten. And what happened is, Zafi finds him, and Zafi says to Ultraman, like, I can revive you, and we're gonna have to go back to the Planet of Light. But Ultraman says he can't because, he wants to stay on Earth because he already fused with, the human in that series. I forget his name at the moment. I'll put it up on screen. But he says, like, I already fused with this human, and, yeah. So, like, if I go, then I'll have to, like, he's gonna die. And Zafi's just kind of like, oh, well, it just so happens I have two lives with me, so you can, like, you can come back home and he can live on. And it was just such a very cop-out ending. I was not a big fan of that. But here, it plays out the same way in Shin Ultraman, where Ultraman he's fighting Zetten, and he ends up getting killed, and Zafi finds him, and he says, he revives him, and then he says, Ultraman, you're gonna have to come back to the planet of light. And the same thing plays out. Ultraman says, I can, because I already fused with this human, and he'll, be dead without me. And yeah, Zalfi says no, but then Ultraman says, like, I will sacrifice myself. So Ultraman ends up sacrificing himself so, his human counterpart can live on Earth. And I think that's a much better ending than what the original series gave us. Again, I still like the original series, but one thing that I wasn't a big fan of was the ending. And I think Shin Ultraman, like, kind of changes it to that way, like, it's not a cop-out ending. Like, it's impactful, and I think it was done very well. Unfortunately, the biggest issue this movie's facing right now has nothing to do with the movie itself, which is why I'm not talking about this in my overall negatives part of the review. I want to just take an entire section of this review just to talk about this issue. The issue being the U.S. release of Shin Ultraman on Blu-ray. For those who don't know, Cleopatra Entertainment had the rights to distribute Shin Ultraman for the U.S. Which obviously that means providing a Blu-ray release as well as a DVD release, and maybe having it streamed somewhere. I don't know where Shin Ultraman is streaming right now, but obviously I'm into Blu-rays, but still, yeah, you get the point. They have the rights to distribute Shin Ultraman in the U.S., and unfortunately, their release of the movie is unfortunately not very good. There are a lot of issues with this release. Issues including broken subtitles, outright missing subtitles in the opening scene and the end credits, dub titles. So the subtitles in this movie, they're not based on any translations from the script or anything like that. They're based on the dub, which is really weird because for the theatrical release of Shin Ultraman, they had proper, more accurate, subtitles, and it's just really weird that they just gave us dub titles. They did their own thing when they didn't have to because better subtitles already exist. It makes no sense to me. Various different grammar issues with the subtitles, and some of the video files in this release are very they're corrupted. So a lot of times you get a few visual glitches that are very, very distracting at points, and it's just very it's unfortunate. Granted, some of these things have been fixed for future releases. The missing subtitles have been fixed, so they're now in the opening scene and the end credits. And the subtitles are no longer broken, they're fixed now, but still, they're still dub titles, so they're still based off the English dub. Again, the video corruption with the visual glitches is still there, and just the grammar things with the grammar issues with the subtitles, there's still some issues here, and it keeps this release from being perfect. It's not outright terrible, so if you do really, really, really want Shin Ultraman on Blu-ray, then it wouldn't be the end of the world if you got this, but if you want something better quality, then I'd recommend waiting for a better release of this movie, because right now this release is unfortunately not as good as it could have been, but I digress. Anyway, at the end of the day, what did I think of Shin Ultraman? I really like Shin Ultraman. Just like with Shin Godzilla, I think that Shin Ultraman, I think it's an excellent movie that stays faithful to the original, Ultraman series, and also adds a few new ideas and whatnot to keep it fresh and original. So yeah, Shin Ultraman I think is a very good movie. So yeah, very good movie. I'd say it gets a 9 out of 10. Very good. I like Shin Godzilla a little more, but still, not knocking Shin Ultraman at all. Shin Ultraman is still a phenomenal movie, like I just said. I just think Shin Godzilla has very strong political commentary. So, yeah, both are good movies, but if I had to pick one, I'm gonna have to go with Shin Godzilla. Sorry. Anyway, that is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, Zack out.